Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ask the Experts, Quality System Integration for Mergers and Acquisitions. We are so glad you're here. We're going to give everyone just another minute or two to pop into the session, and then we'll go over a couple quick housekeeping things and introduce our speakers for today. Okay. All right. Once again, we want to welcome you to Ask the Experts session this month. This month's focus is on quality system integration for mergers and acquisitions. We're going to be taking the questions that you guys have given us during your registration process, which we have based this presentation around, and answering those questions. We're also going to be allowing you to ask questions during the session, and on your dashboard panel, you should see a place where you can type in questions to the presenters, and we'll be checking those throughout. Allow me to first introduce myself. I'm Valerie Hoffman, marketing here at Compliance Team. Today is a special session because it's actually my last session, and I just want to thank everybody for the last, I think we've been doing these webinars for about 5 years now, off and on, 4 or 5 years, and I just want to thank you all for being a part of these sessions, for the great feedback you've given, and for keep coming back. It's the greatest compliment is when we hear that something helped you, and I just want to say thank you for all of that. Moving along, I'm going to go ahead and introduce your speakers. One other thing I do want to mention before I do that is we will be sending out a copy of this presentation, a recording, and if you attended throughout the session, you will get a copy of a certificate that you can use if you would like for any professional credits. So make sure to stay on throughout the session and look for those follow-up materials. They should be coming to you tomorrow afternoon. All right, so first up, we have Regina Fullen. She is our Vice President of RAQA Consulting. Regina assists clients in the medical device and pharmaceutical industries to help them achieve ever-increasing compliance to regulations in pharma, medical device, and related industries. Here at CT, she's our writer. She's writes so many of our articles. She is our guru. She helps medical manufacturers stay current with regulatory changes, industry trends, and as always, helps you improve product quality through her knowledge. She is a CQE, CQA, Certified Manager of Quality Organizational Excellence with ASQ, and she also holds a Regulatory Affairs Certification for medical devices with RAPS. So as always, if you've been in some of these sessions, you know Regina by now, and we are so glad to have her with us. And I have the privilege today of also introducing Patricia Rader. She is our VP of Operations. She comes with quite the resume and experience she'll be bringing to this session today as well. Her 17-year background in life science consulting operations includes supporting 2 mergers and 1 acquisition, including remediating, designing, and implementing operational programs to improve efficiency in the resulting companies. She has led a variety of audit services in the clinical regulatory sector, and prior to entering the life science consultancy, she designed and implemented global training programs supporting commercial launch of cutting-edge software products. So we are so glad that she is with us today. And without any further ado, I will turn it on over to Regina and Patricia.
Thank you, Val. That's a great introduction. As always, I will be missing you. So our general overview of what we're going to be doing today is we have 3 major types of corporate restructurings. We're going to say is, we're saying mergers and acquisitions, but we're really different types of corporate restructuring requires changes. We want to talk about the stakeholder bargaining position, because everything trickles down from that sale of the company, and understanding where the stakeholders bargaining position is kind of dictates how you're going to be doing this transition period. We're going to discuss some risks that you'll have to manage through this process. We'll have to discuss the things that you do before and after that contract closes, and then just a basic summary and final thoughts. So when we talk about the three major types of corporate restructuring, we got mergers, which is when you're taking two companies of similar size, or maybe not similar size, but they're large companies or small companies, and they're kind of doing like a joint venture or something like that. Like, you know, we had GlaxoSmithKline or Bayer and Monsanto merged. Maybe one is larger than the other, but they're going to, they're joining forces. The power structure is relatively equivalent. And then we have acquisitions, and an acquisition is that there's one larger company that is buying a smaller company to incorporate it into its larger thing, like a board ship. So, you know, we had Pfizer that acquired Hospira, or Johnson & Johnson that acquired, their entire business model is based on acquiring smaller companies and making it part of the larger whole. And then the third thing, which is kind of an opposite of a merger or acquisition, is a divestiture, which also requires some changes in transition plan. And that is when a larger company spins off a portion of its business. So we have an example with Abbott that spun off Hospira, and then, of course, Hospira was bought by Johnson or Pfizer, and then later they spun off AbbVie. They split Abbott into AbbVie and Abbott, and so there's a break off there. So these are the three major types of changes. And Patricia, this is your
Thanks,
slide.
Regina. First off, I'm really glad to be talking to you all today. I'm very excited to be part of this team. Lots and lots of knowledge and expertise on Regina's side. So in all of these types of mergers and acquisitions and divestitures, there's going to be risk. In life sciences, as we all know, we are facing a group of risks that are more complex and really can be a major stop with a lot of these types of acquisitions, mergers, and divestitures. So, you know, we do work in one of the highest regulated industries in the world because we have to create, you know, drugs and medical devices and, you know, compounds that are used by human beings to improve their health. So we have to be very, very compliant to all of the regulations in our markets. So we have specific areas that we have to look at when, you know, life science medical device company is performing one of these moves. Cost is a big issue to look at here because a lot of our costs as life science medical device industry is making sure that we comply to regulations in our market. So it could be extremely costly to make a mistake or miss something while we're planning and initiating a major change in company structure. Just checking.
And the cultural risk. Oh, were you done, or did you want me to?
I was going to go with the cultural risk, yeah. So in addition to the costs, the life science and medical device have big risk in company reputation if it gets out that, they have a product recall or something went wrong with a bought company or a merger that's going to affect their product. Their reputation is going to be online. And that's going to be costly in product sales, public perception, and all of those types of things that you're just going to have to mitigate as you move forward. In a lower level, with any merger, acquisition, or divestiture, you also have to look at your people and your culture. Bringing two companies together as merging workforces, and you have to really kind of go down into those details to make sure that operationally you're not missing anything as you move forward with your operations and employees. So next slide.
One of our biggest examples that I can think of right now about how risk played a huge role in the failure of a merger was when Fresenius Kabi had plans to purchase this injectable drug product company called Acorn. This was pretty close to home for me, as these were companies that had company presence in Illinois, where I live. And you can see that it eventually resulted in the CEO of Acorn resigning. But what had happened is, after they had signed an agreement to merge, and there was a clause in that contract that said, that defined what a material adverse effect was, and said if there was a material adverse effect that they could back out of the merger. So they ended up backing out of the merger, and this was after they had already determined what the merged corporate structure was going to be, who was going to be responsible. They were working on a transition plan, and then it got all unraveled. They found that there were, after the signing of the merger, Acorn had grossly declining financial performance over 4 quarters. And a whistleblower within Acorn notified or brought it to light that there were large data integrity issues at Acorn that were not being remediated, even though Acorn was aware of these problems. And for those reasons, this $30 million deal was rolled back. Now, it's very expensive to roll back a $30 million deal. So, our position on this whole thing is that an audit would have caught it. Now, this is because the sales pipeline may have been evaluated by a financial auditor up front, and a compliance auditor, someone like myself or Patricia, would be able to look at the compliance status of the company and might have been able to identify these issues before the ink ever hit the paper. And they could have turned away from that acquisition up front. So Patricia's favorite thing to say is, we don't say trust but verify, we say trust and verify. So you can't just take the word of the people that you're bargaining with. you need to have enough of an open relationship at the bargaining table that you aren't afraid of showing or testing those assumptions. So, of course, the risk could have been managed with a due diligence audit. And again, you know, both on the financial side and on the compliance side. So, yes, there was protection in that the contract had a material adverse effect clause. But our position here is that that wasn't sufficient because that cost could have been avoided through a due diligence audit. The other important thing to understand is that mergers and acquisitions are wildly risky. There is no way you can mitigate your risk by 90%. It's wildly risky, and we'll get into the reason why later on. But because that uncertainty exists, there's a certain amount of trusting your instincts and listening to people. And if you feel like something's wrong, your gut is probably telling you something good, and that means that you need to go and dive a little deeper into the information to understand why it is that you're feeling uncomfortable. Because usually those hairs standing on the back of your neck means you overlooked something. And that means that planning is very essential. So even while you're still at the bargaining table, you're trying to understand what this acquisition is going to give you so you can end up with a win-win situation. So that the sellers are coming away from the table happy that they've satisfied their side, and that the purchasers are coming away from the bargaining table understanding what they're getting out of the deal. And this means that you need to work with the stakeholders to ensure all those necessary areas are covered.
So this risk difference really is guided by the intent and the bargaining position of each company moving into this potential partnership or merger. So in this example, we have a purchaser, parent company, it's a larger company, and a seller, and they're going to be the acquired company. And their intent is to, for the purchaser, they want to grow their portfolio. So what does this mean to them? Well, they're looking at their return on investment. They've looked at the smaller company. There's some potential there for, if we purchase them, we're going to make more money, which is what they always want to do. Also, they could have technology gains or intellectual or operational capital, patents, great process, new method of doing things that improve the synergy for the parent company, both by bringing them in and potentially those types of technology improvements rippling through the rest of the operations for the parent. So that's really good incentive for a purchaser to take a look at a company. The seller would also have their main goal in mind, which is going to come in through the initial conversations in the bargaining process. I'm looking to manage my business risk by selling. Well, what does that mean? Maybe they need a cash infusion. You know, they're a startup, they've gotten as far as they can on development, they're close to commercialization, they need that push over into the market that the bigger company is going to give them. That would be a great reason to do it. Also, smaller companies have a hard time getting name recognition. Maybe they want to attach themselves to a high reputable company who's big worldwide, has the reputation, and they can just, advance their product and, gain that credibility in the marketplace by merging with a larger company. Operational areas could be an issue. Maybe the big company has a better supply chain. They've negotiated it out. They've worked out the processes. It's something that has been a challenge for the smaller company, so they're going to take advantage of that. In a lot of small companies, selling to a larger company is an exit strategy. They've taken it as far as they could. They've looked at it as, I'm going to sell this and move to my next adventure. That would be serial entrepreneurs that like to start something to a certain point, sell it, and move to the next thing. So these are some of the really high-level examples both companies would be looking at. And there's effects in there that are going to ripple down into the various operational areas. So Regina, if you'd like to cover that.
Yeah, so there's some other parties that are involved here. We got the employees, we got the deal makers, we got the customers, and I did not put in here the shareholders. So the one group that I want to call out specifically are the deal makers. And the deal makers, they just make money on the deal. They're not necessarily interested in what happens to the company afterward, but they're the ones that are making the match. They're the ones that saying, hey, this is a good company for this company to acquire. And they'll get well compensated for making that deal. But the employees and the customers and also the shareholders, they have very little say in what actually happens in the deal. They are recipients of the change. And that's kind of where we are as quality professionals, because we're in that employees category. So a lot of employees are worried about, well, will I still have a job, or is my job going to be outsourced? Do I still get the same benefits? What happens to my pension? You know, if I'm vested in my pension, does that go away, or does that get converted into stock in the new company as opposed to that big company or whatever? Do I have to relocate? And then making a cultural shift. So, you know, I used to be part of a small startup company. It was really fun. It was highly energetic, and now I just come to work every day and I just do my job. Customers, on the other hand, what are they concerned about? They're concerned about, am I going to have product? Is it going to be the same quality? Am I going to still be able to access that product? Is this a credible company that I'm buying from now? Do I trust this company? Do they have goodwill? Have they built up goodwill with us? And, you know, now that it's taking on this new product pipeline, is that product pipeline acceptable? And then I'll just kind of go into the whole thing with shareholders. Shareholders are worried about similar things to their employees, or they're worried more about the security of their stock, and how much does it split? Do they get any special bonuses for it? Will the stock hold its value? How do their voting shares work? How much of it is, you know, allocated to the company A, and how much of it is allocated to company B if it's a split? So these parties don't really have a voice in the bargaining process, but as affected parties, they can be a powerful force. And I'm going to go back and remind you of that Fresenius Kabi failed transaction, where it was a whistleblower from Acorn that might have prompted the data integrity problems and raised that issue as a potential concern and an expensive situation to remediate. So we already know risk with mergers and acquisitions is an ever-present factor. And as quality professionals, we are in this plan, do, study, act cycle. We might call it CAPA We might call it ISO 14971. It's basically a process of gathering information, using that information, finding out what happens as based on that information, and then making some changes. And generally, when we do risk management, we're either avoiding the risk, we're mitigating the risk and making it less serious, or we're accepting the risk. The reason why mergers and acquisitions are so risky is because the realm of the merger and acquisition is that you're transferring that risk to somebody else. The risk isn't going away. Instead, it's a means of being able to hand that risk to an organization that may be better equipped to handle it. Keeping that in mind, we have to work with the fact that we are delving a lot into the unknown, where there's things that you know, there's things that you don't know, and then of the things that you don't know, there's the things that you don't know that you can find out, and there's the things that you don't know that are unknowable. And that's the realm where we're working in, and that's why there's risk.
So with all that in mind, I love this slide because it graphically tells you what PDSA is going to try to achieve for you. Mitigating or removing the risk as you move forward and keeping your mind on that reward. So, you know, it's going to be really a teeter-totter as you move forward. The best way to approach this would be to use the PDSA model, because it's going to allow you to approach all these activities in a methodical fashion. Risk is also, it also incorporates emotion as people move through these. We're humans, we have emotions, we get nervous. And going in a methodical fashion is going to help you move forward without a lot of stress. It'll reduce that as well. So moving on, remembering the FK, the Acorn deal, you know, an audit would have caught the issue that they came up against. So if they had taken a good look and gone through in a methodical fashion audits, operations, and quality, you know, controls, they most likely could have found those data integrity problems. And they could have either addressed them, or that would have flagged FK to back out of the deal. The S in PDSA follows very closely the standard audit process that we're all familiar with. You plan, you review, and you identify the risks. In this case, you're going to have to modify them to the particular situation that you're going through, depending on what kind of merger divestiture activity you're going into. But it's doable. Takes that methodical fashion, process. And if you do follow it, knowing the knowns and unknowns, you'll end up with a full list of risks that can be mitigated. You'll also know what you don't know, and you'll have contingencies for unexpected situations. I particularly like prioritizing the identified risks according to a standard audit plan or audit report. Number one would be high impact risks. Those are the ones that you want to look at and mitigate the first, right up front. Those would be the immediate threats to the deal or immediate threats to operations after the deal. So those are the ones that you want to focus on first, make sure that you're moving forward. Medium risks, you can mitigate them, work around them, and move forward, as long as you have a really good plan for it. And then the third thing I think is very important in any of these activities is opportunities for improvement. During merger of operations, if you're following the process correctly, you're going to find synergies and you're going to find better ways to do things. And I think that's a good end goal for studying the process as you move forward and looking to improve your operations afterwards. So once we've done all of this, the next step is to get everybody moving forward into the plan. So, Regina? Regina?
Thank you. I was muted.
Oh, my goodness.
So I liked what you said about how the whole point of doing a merger is to identify synergies and be able to do things better together than you would have been able to do alone. But we often know that the decision to merge was not made at our operational level. And so we need to be aware of that, and then to accept that the change is here, and that's okay. But there can be some emotions that run high during the transition period. So you just do your best.
Yes, so planning for this change, we've talked about audits. I think it should always start there. We're going to identify our risks and what we can be addressed. Flowing from that, some side benefits of doing a good deep dive is you're going to get clarification on the vision. You might initially go in there with a desired outcome, but then after that audit process, you're going to have some modifications to that, which is not necessarily a bad thing. You know, change is mutable, and you just really never know what you're going to get out of it. So the vision may change. You can react to that if you know what the lay of the land is based on an audit. From there, you're more capable of communicating why you're making this change and what you're going to do moving forward. So it has a potential of really bringing a high level of optimism and confidence in public at large, customers, and your employees. So, you know, you've got the clarity of thought and you've got the high level goal in place, and you can communicate that very well. The next thing to do off of an audit would be an integration plan. And that's going to come from high level and then trickle down into the different areas of operations. And that's going to, of course, affect all personnel, because, you know, you're going to have your management cycle, and then you're going to have, you know, all the different areas of operation that may need to move or change their operations or their systems and all of that type of thing. So as we're moving forward this, and you've got the integration plan and the personnel assigned and everything, based on those audits, you're also going to have a good, clear idea of who's going to be accountable for what in each of the steps of the process.
And now that you have a good deployment plan before you've signed the contract, once the contract gets closed or signed, now you have a transition period in your merger and acquisition. And because you started out with the beginning with the end in mind, we now can simply move to deployment. Deployment means You know who all your stakeholders are. You know how you know where you're going. You know who's going to do it. Now it's a matter of doing it. Again, it's dictated from high levels of top management, and you will not necessarily have a plan for how things are going to be done at the operational level or tactical level. So if you are a manager or a supervisor, not necessarily, you're going to be managing up and managing down. And the biggest thing you'll be managing in a situation like this is you're managing the fear. There's a lot of changes. People don't like changes. People are afraid of change. So to the extent possible, as you receive information, it should be openly shared. Unless, of course, you're told that there's something confidential that can't be shared. But employees gain a lot of trust from knowing that they know everything that their manager knows. And there may be some differences of opinion where people think that a management decision is unfair, or they're not happy with how it affects them. So when you're managing down, I think it's important to avoid the micromanagement. And if a decision is going to affect your staff, allow your staff to have a say in how that decision is implemented. Because the people at top levels of management don't always understand how those decisions affect the people at operational levels. And so it's going to be a little bit loose. And that also means that there's going to be some project management that's going to be needed, and you may need to adjust the schedules based on, okay, let's say if you have two departments that are merging into one, there's a definition of who does what, and there may be some kinks to work out there. You don't want to be the person that says you do this, you do that, when the people know best where their strengths are. And so you want to play to people's strengths within the project plan, making sure you meet your milestones, making sure that all your tasks are covered. And there's a certain amount of patience that is needed for this type of work, because it's frustrating to go through changes, and sometimes the changes are unclear, and some people don't understand how to interpret the changes that are in front of them. And understand that there are some things that may require a slower transition, or things that don't need to necessarily be done today. So you should be defining what your urgent needs are, what your midterm needs are, and what your long-term needs are, and maybe allowing for some flexibility because your workforce needs to adjust to all these changes, as you do as well, because you're just receiving the word that there's going to be a big corporate shakeup, and you're going to need to adjust too. This can be a very emotional process for people. And, now we're kind of into the section of this webinar where we're going to answer your questions. And the first question I got was about scheduling of maintenance activities, which I wasn't quite sure how this fit into the mergers and acquisitions, but I think in some ways it does, because what's really important in a merger and acquisition situation, especially if you are leaving one building and transferring the ownership of a bunch of equipment into a new place, is how am I going to manage all this? And our last month's webinar on relocation qualifications kind of answered a lot of those questions. But before you even move, you need to make sure that if it's like a production suite, that there should be adequate inventory to be able to cover your customers' needs while you're taking that transition. The work should be continuous, or at least seamless from the customer standpoint, because why are we selling product anyway? Because we're trying to sell to customers. And we can't allow back orders or anything like that to get in the way of a smooth corporate transition. The next question that we got was, how do you determine whose QMS gets absorbed and who gets to keep autonomy over their QMS, their quality management system? And actually, this is based on business need. So a business that is, for instance, like Johnson & Johnson. Johnson & Johnson has a large umbrella company with a large number of smaller companies under its umbrella. And Johnson & Johnson, the overarching corporate giant, manages those different entities under their own separate quality management system with a corporate auditing model that accounts for those different changes. For instance, a company whose job is to make consumer products like Q-tips or toilet paper or something like that is going to have a vastly different quality management system than a company that makes vaccines. But they're both owned by Johnson & Johnson. You can't expect that you're going to have the same quality management system. And so if they're purchasing a company, they might make modifications based on risk management, but I don't know that there's going to be huge differences in that quality management system by the time they're finished, unless there's deficiencies identified by corporate. Or if you have a medical device company that is purchasing a pharmaceutical entity. Now, those are under two different regulatory standards, 820 for the medical device and 210-211 for the pharmaceutical company. And let's say the purpose of the merger was in order to produce a combination product incorporating the pharmaceutical with the medical device. It's entirely possible that the quality system for the pharmaceutical product will remain as is. The quality system for the medical device would remain as is, and maybe they would set up a third entity, third division, where the combination product is made that incorporates elements of both. And then in an example of a place where I worked, we made a software as a medical device. We purchased another company that had made a similar software medical device, but we purchased it because the company we bought had some proprietary code that we wanted to incorporate into our own product, and it was eventually going to be Sunset, the product that the company we bought. In that case, the company that we bought ended up adopting our quality system of the larger company in order to harmonize, because they were both very similar products and product types. So it really is business based on whose quality system absorbs whose. But in general, just broad strokes, it's generally the larger company that dictates who gets to do what.
Okay, thanks, Regina. Next question was about document migration management. I think this is a top-down approach. You really do need to start in this process to evaluate the quality management structure, like Regina just mentioned. Are you going to have multiple QMS or just one unified system? If it's multiple, then you don't really have to migrate anything. You just keep your systems separate. If they're merging, a large company bought a small company and you're going to use the large company's quality management system, then this process has to be husbanded very carefully to make sure that the operators in all of the employees can get to the procedures and records that they need. So, that's a very important thing to do. So it's going to have to take some very close management, good communication, project plans. You have to live by them. I live by them. I think everybody should. And really, really good communication. So you're not during this migration process causing an inadvertent stall in operations. I should also validate any new data archival tools and follow all of your good documentation practices and all data integrity practices. There should be operational procedures in place to follow that, as well as records that you can make note of what you've done. So you also have your audit trail. Next question is, what are GCP risks? And this is a huge issue. By nature, clinical companies that are being bought, they live in a risky environment. They're creating a new drug or medical device. They're in some form of clinical trial. Either they're going into phase 1 or they're in the midst of one and trying to meet their endpoints. They have many areas where they need to be audited. Depending on the complexity of the clinical trial, you can be audited at the inception. You can be audited all the way along the way by regulatory authorities. So at the very least, you have to do a good process audit up front, make sure their quality system is correct for their clinical trial. That would at least identify the risks as you move forward. A good idea is to take a look at their protocols and what they're planning for compiling their trial master file, and do they have processes in place to make sure that's updated as necessary throughout the trials. There are so many that I can keep on going forever, but I think the other main, most important area to look at to alleviate buying a clinical science company is, what is their monitoring plan? You want to make sure that they're operating in a state of control. You want to make sure that they've planned their activities to document if they're hitting their endpoints or if there is a risk to hitting their endpoints. You also want to see their submission plan and how long it's going to take. The other big risk in this is, do they have enough money to get through their clinical trial? Or is that one of the things that they're coming to you for? So that could take an hour and a half webinar just to walk through all of this stuff. But, that's the short answer.
And we got another question about risk categorization. Now, of course, there's lots of different types of risks associated with merger and acquisition. And, the people who are the deal makers, or the CEOs, the people who are actually doing the purchasing, they're largely concerned with business risk. The risk of the business deal. Is it going to fall apart? Is this company that I'm purchasing really a good cost benefit for my company? It's about operational finance. But as we all know, the reputational risks, the quality risks, the compliance risks are all costly to remediate if they aren't done correctly. And we also know that part of the whole point of a merger or acquisition or divestiture is to reduce the amount of risk, or to offset it, or to change the risk profile in a specific business or business sector. So what can you do as a quality professional? Well, I think what's important here is that when you do your risk categorization, that means that you're going to have many, many different types of FMEAs, failure mode effect analysis. So we're used to doing like a user FMEA for a medical device. We're used to doing a process FMEA for the production, for the process plan or process steps. We might even be doing like an FMEA for like the different types of ways that the product could fail out in the field. We now need, in this whole risk categorization, to get creative with the types of FMEAs that we might do that signal business risk on the inside, meaning the risks of introducing new products to your portfolio, or the risk inherent to those products that maybe, like in the example where I participated in the 2 software as a medical device products, we went through all the different complaint data for the older medical device and evaluated all those complaints against our existing FMEA to see if there were new risks in this new medical device design that didn't exist in our existing design. So those are the types of things that you want to be looking at and get creative. And I think in earlier slides, I did give a list of the different types of risks that there might be in a merger and acquisition, but I just wanted to point out some other ones. We also, oh, this one's yours for the special situation, so I'll let you take this one.
Sure. Special situations, startup companies, yes. There are so many startup companies out there these days. It's really amazing and fascinating to watch. It's okay. I think a lot of startup companies, especially in pharma and bio, are looking to get to a certain point and then get subsumed by a bigger company. One of their challenges are they're moving so fast because the market's so volatile and there's so many good ideas coming out that they really need to plan and become sufficiently compliant to prevent and prove that they're preventing business risk to any purchasing company. And sufficiently compliant is a great term. What they need to do is they need to, early on in their operations, as they start operating, create a fit-to-form quality system. And what that would look like is you look at the end of your operations and you put the whole structure together. This is what we're planning, right? For what we're doing right now, we have our quality policy or manual. We have all of our operational procedures written and followed, and we have records of following all of these procedures to the letter. What you're doing is you're proving that you understand that you need to be compliant. You are being compliant at this time, and you have a plan for compliance as you move forward in growth. So that's the best thing that you can do if you're a startup. The next special situation, I think, is very important as well. See a lot of this going out on the market. Implantable medical devices. They're risky as we go, as you can get with, they go into the body, they're, class 3, they're high risk. In these situations, I think the biggest things that you have to do, and I'm always going to say quality system because that's the way I am, but the areas that you have to look at are, has the safety profile been put together, vetted, and are you testing that as you're developing this medical device? And that would include, any electronic components, materials, all of that. You have to look at every single piece because it's going into the body and you want to make sure that you're removing as much unknown as you can and as much potential harm to the end patient. You also want to prove efficacy. You have to have a plan moving forward. You know, this is why we think it's going to be effective. We've done, you know, early stage studies in the lab. We're doing, you know, basic research studies, you know, in animals as we can, all of that type of thing. The other big point with this is document all of your design controls and make sure that you're testing them and documenting that as well.
So we got another question about audit trail integration.
Okay.
And that one just came this morning, and so I added it last minute here. So from a perspective of when you're doing a merger and acquisition, you're going to have a data migration plan in place. So you're taking all this data from some other entity, and you're going to need to identify what data is worth saving, what data do we archive long-term. The general rule of thumb is that you want to keep a minimum of 3 years of past data. And if it had been longer since the last FDA inspection for that entity, then you want to go back to at least all the data that had been collected as of the last FDA inspection. You can archive the other data, but what's going to be important is that you've validated that the data that you've migrated has accurately been migrated. And you also want to validate that you can actually retrieve the data at some future point. So let's say you're backing up everything to tape. You need to make sure that your tape is going to stay integral over that time, and that your tape drives are going to be able to read the data even 10 years from now when technology has changed. Because we still have to comply with the mandated retention schedules, which are quite indefinite in length. As far as audit trails, yes, you need to make sure that if there was an audit trail associated with that data, and of course, some of this data may be older than before the data integrity standard came out, you still want to make sure that it is an accurate depiction of the data at the time it was created. And then, you know, general industry trends. Mergers and acquisitions are here to stay. It is a proven business model. Large companies like it because they get to go shop around for the clinical stage companies and determine if there are any products there that really mesh well with their business model, and they don't have to develop anything in-house. That means they can reduce their R&D staff. That means that they have less risk, because a lot of times these startup companies are financed somehow publicly, don't have to involve with that investment. And all they need to worry about is taking a product whose proof of concept has already been established and moving it to market. And all those previous stages of determining proof of concept, determining whether, you know, whether the biocompatibility studies and all that have passed, has already happened. And now all they're worried about is, now we're at the final stages and trying to get that to sale. And an operating company that specializes in selling is going to have a lot more expertise in that than the smaller entity who is more involved in developing a new product. Similar to that, another industry trend is a contract manufacturing model, where a lot of companies are, instead of manufacturing the product themselves, they're finding contract manufacturers to make the products for them. And contract manufacturing has a lot of similarities with like a corporate merger in that it is a collaborative relationship. You have two companies that are working together to manufacture a product. And in some cases, a company may end up purchasing a contract manufacturer if that contract manufacturer has optimized a process that's proprietary, such as like a additive manufacturing or 3D printing type of work to build a product. If a contract manufacturer has special expertise in an area, it would also be another company that might be purchased. The last thing that I wanted to say here is that the FDA is now changing its focus to risk management. 21 CFR 820, which is the medical device quality system regulation, is in the process of being rewritten to align more closely with ISO 13485. And 13485 was recently revised to incorporate greater risk management standards into it. This also means that it's likely that the FDA standards for complaint handling will align more closely to ISO 14971, which is for risk management of medical devices. The FDA is changing its focus to risk management with the risks involved in merger and acquisition, both business risk and compliance risk. Be prepared to be very risk mindful. You cannot eliminate all risks. There are acceptable risks, there are unacceptable risks. And but we need to show that there was some thought process behind that risk management in order to be successful in your merger and acquisition. Which means that, again, we're quality professionals. We don't necessarily work in the boardroom. So we can't control whether the company undergoes a corporate restructuring. Well, maybe that one whistleblower could. But in general, we are recipients of a management decision. Now, you can either feel like you're a victim and complain about it, or you can change your attitude toward it and say, we're going to make the best of this. And that means you're approaching it with an open mind. You're being strong, you're leaning into it, and you're being ready, you're being proactive, you're listening, you're looking to others to try to figure out how all this is going to fit together. But what's also important, besides listening to your superiors who are telling you what you got to do, and listening to your subordinates who are voicing their own concerns, is you need to listen to your inner voice too. And your inner voice is going to tell you that there are areas areas that tell you that there's something you don't know. And you're going to be tasked with trying to find out what those things are that you don't know. And again, communicating and being part of this transition plan where you are now reaching across the aisle to people who are from other companies, other backgrounds, other cultures, who may be learning more from you too. So it's a very fluid exchange here. But one thing's for certain, people are going to be very, very busy during this transition period. They might not have a lot of time to talk to you, but if you are politely, kindly, and mindfully offering help with their struggles, you will be appreciated. And especially if knowing your own personal strengths, that you can come to them giving them help in the areas where you have personal power, people will appreciate that. So that is the end of the presentation. I wanted to let you know a little bit about our company, compliance team. We've been doing this since 2003. And I'd like to open the floor to additional questions.
Thank you, Regina and Patricia. Just a quick note, everyone will get a copy of this session and a certificate, as well as the recording. That should be coming at you tomorrow afternoon. If you guys don't want to miss out on any future sessions or anything like that, make sure to, and other updates we release, you can scan that QR code and it'll take you to our LinkedIn page and you can give us a follow. And, you know, certainly sign up for future sessions. We'd love to see you in there. All right, I know we're a little bit after our 3 o'clock target, but we don't want to send you home empty-handed. So do you have, if there's any questions, go ahead and type them in the question box. And Regina, if you could go to the slide before real quick, I'll kind of go over, if you don't know about compliance team, I'll go over that real quick. Like Regina said, we've been in business since 2003 and we have protected over 200 life science companies. We work, we are the experts at quality systems, engineering validation programs, and clinical studies, helping companies consistently meet compliance standards. We have vast knowledge of FDA, ISO, EMA, Health Canada, and other regulatory regulating bodies. That helps prevent your company from finding itself, you know, in some of these case studies that we've presented here. Our goal is to keep you running, keep everything smooth, and make your job easier. So we appreciate you today joining us. If at any time you would be interested in a custom training session for your own team, you can always get on complianceteamllc.com, or you can email us at solutions@complianceteamllc.com, and we'd be happy to talk with you and see what we can do to help you out. All right, well, thank you so much. We appreciate it as always. As I mentioned earlier, if you weren't on, this is my last session, and I just want to thank you all for being a part of our webinar series for the last 4 years or so. This series will continue, and I'll be sure to keep an eye, maybe pop in a session or two. I want to thank Regina and I want to thank Patricia today for all the knowledge that they've shared with us, and you as well for joining. Have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.